Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join. We're super excited. Zoltan, very nice to have you joining us this morning. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
I am too, as someone who's very tech heavy. This is going to be quite the fun dialogue. So I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you again for taking the time. Okay, we will just give folks a few more seconds together and then we're just going to jump right into this. Life treating you good over there in South Carolina, Zoltan?
Yeah, very much so. Um, Beautiful sunny day, and just excited to get the week started after a week of vacation.
Ah, very nice. Jealous. Well, awesome. Well, let's take it away here. We definitely thank everybody for their attendance. We welcome your questions. Put them in the chat as we go. If they make sense to the dialogue, we'll go ahead and pick them up as we go along. But thank you so very much for taking your time. This is what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, you know that when you registered. So we are just going to jump right into this. So the topic of this is that, let's go back to the title here, why cybersecurity tools alone aren't enough. Wow, what an interesting topic. So basically, there's so many tools out there. There's tool overload out there, and they do promise so many things. My favorite promise is the easy button. Oh, buy my tool and, you'll have everything you need and a cup of coffee and it'll be so easy and it'll be perfect. You won't have to do anything else. And Zoltan, you are definitely in the space as a CIO, CTO. So what are your thoughts when you hear those kind of promises?
Uh, it used to excite me, but that's really not the
You
case
got
anymore.
wiser.
Yeah, it's generally what a new tool means is more overhead, uh, which is a great way to level up your team, but there's no one size fits all solution. There's no one tool that fixes everything. Usually it's tools layered together, and it adds significant overhead, both the systems and infrastructure and the employees, both of which tend to lack, budget input.
Yeah, those are very valid points. I'm a tech nerd. I love some good technology, and I normally will spend my free time playing with technology. My husband totally makes fun of me. So nobody here that, technology is not a great thing because it really is, and it can add a lot of value to the organization. But it's more the reality. It's like what you said. I used to, but I don't really think that way anymore because you get to a point, you go through enough of this, and you're like, yeah, that sounds good on paper, but that's not really exactly what's happening. So let's talk about the reality. Check out that stat there. 68% of breaches involve misconfigured tools all the time and underutilized. We see it all the time. Companies buy tools, they think it's going to take care of everything, but they don't go through the cycle of really understanding and doing an appropriate implementation and adoption. They don't monitor the tools. That's a big one for what we see a lot. And then, they maybe got one use case on it, but they didn't really get all of them. And isn't that interesting that so many of the breaches involve that? Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, so just over the past few years, we had big issue with CrowdStrike, which
Yep.
that was self-inflicted. SolarWinds is another huge one.
Yeah.
All the systems that tool was installed on were highly vulnerable. Um, and then the other side of it is lack of sufficient oversight. Another example being the Colonial Pipeline hack.
Yeah.
So these are all very significant events that were directly tied to the tool or the promises of a tool or the lack of oversight of the tool, because we got squirrely, we got distracted, or we just didn't have the resources to keep up with it, and all of a sudden here's a massive outage.
Yeah. Yeah, and the CrowdStrike one in particular, like that, not picking on them per se, but I used to hear for years, I used to hear companies say, "Oh, well, we use X, fill in the blank here, so we're fine." No, no, you're not. It's not that. I think people are a little wiser these days, and then something like a CrowdStrike happens, and you realize that not only is any vendor, any software immune, but two, it happens, and so you have to have that mindset that this absolutely can happen. I used to also hear back in the day, well, we don't need to worry about security because we use AWS. And your point is what exactly? Like, that doesn't make you secure because you picked Microsoft or you picked Amazon or you picked this. Again, I don't hear that as much in the last several years as I used to hear it all the time. But yeah, it's definitely a thing out there. So you said tools need oversight, and I like that quote there, automation isn't autonomy. So, in your experience, because you work with a lot of different companies similar to what we do, but obviously much more technical bent, and your experience, like how widespread is this with the companies that you've seen over the many years?
It can get pretty ugly. Some of them do a better job at it than others. Um, but labor costs become an issue because the more tools that you have, the more you can't have. There's no such thing as a generalist anymore. There's very few. You can't have one person that knows everything about everything. So you've got to have these specialists running these tools and managing them, and they don't necessarily know what's required on the other side if there's a communication breakdown.
Yeah.
So it can become a beast that kind of runs out of control and takes over the efficiency of the business itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, similar to the risk and compliance space, there's a lack of strategy. Like
Yep,
somebody comes to the organization, oh, we have this problem, knee jerk, go buy this thing. Great. Okay.
yep,
Now maybe that person leaves. Who knows what happened? That's fine. That's there. But to your point, oh, this other thing hit the market, knee jerk, go buy this thing. And then you fast
yep,
forward a number of years, people changes, lack of strategy, and you just kind of have this thing that now has to be managed. We see it all the time with risk and compliance in the same way. Oh, I got to go get this. I got to go with this. I got to go with this. But it's absent of a strategy to kind
yep.
of pull it all together. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I see as an issue uh, is getting the tools to run well uh, through all the different firewall rules. Everything is in the cloud now. It's
Yep.
very it's very difficult to find a tool that you can get an on-prem copy of.
Yep.
And so you have all of these tools that are running in the cloud that are tied into your cloud systems that are on someone else's cloud. And there's just so many layers of complexity there.
So true.
And the other thing that is lacking in many companies, many businesses is a valid test environment. So we're doing all this testing in production in many cases because we might have a small development environment or a small test environment, but it's rarely reflective of production. There
Yeah.
there are very few companies that pull that off effectively because of cost.
Yeah. Valid point. That's a very valid point. I think the bottom line is technology is great, love technology, but I'm constantly preaching this in all that we do, that it's people, process, and technology. You can go buy all the tools you want, but if you don't have the process to run it, to monitor it, to tune it, it's not good. If you don't have the people assigned, they know what they're doing, they know what they're accountable for, they're held accountable to that. You mentioned communication already. Communication is a huge source of failure, even with the technology. And so it really is all three of those coming together.
Yep.
Awesome. So let's jump into why do these fail? Okay, so this first one here, misalignment with the business goals or risk and controls. So a lot of times, especially in the security space, security people like to go off and buy particular tools. Not that they're bad tools per se, but definitely go off and buy tools from their perspective. But does it align with the broader business goals? Is it really mitigating risk that needs to be mitigated? And so really having that kind of thought process, it's crazy how seldom we see companies actually have a cyber plan. I'm sure on the tech side, you probably chuckle because you probably don't see a plan, an IT strategy very often. I see your face smiling there. So, but if you don't have those mechanisms, then how do you know the tool choices you're making align all the way back up to the business? and the appetite of the business and the goals and objectives. Like, how do you even know that? What
I
would
mean,
be?
it really comes down to communication. I think, the IT folks and the business leaders really have to be on the same page. The
Yeah,
IT folks really need to know what the vision of the CEO and the board and the executives, whatever level the organization is at. They really have to understand where the company is headed so that they can build out the infrastructure and the IT capabilities so that the business can handle the growth that's coming in. There's no point in going after the whale if you've got, a little tiny fishing boat.
yeah,
It's going to sink you. And if your IT systems are unreliable, you're dealing with outages. You've got tools that are underutilized. You're spending a lot and not getting the efficiencies promised out of those tools. So that
yeah.
it's really comes down to communication between IT and the MBAs who are leading the company. They really have to be on the same page and speaking the same language, which often they're not.
Yep, you brought up very good, several very valid points. Like they have to speak the same language. Unfortunately, tech people a lot of times speak tech speak, and executives speak risk speech. And if they don't learn how to talk to one another, and predominantly that burden falls on the tech people to change the way they interact with the business leaders, then yes, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be hard for them to get budget approved, to get the right tools that they need or the right funding. You already mentioned resources is an issue. No such thing as a generalist anymore. So now you have to pitch your case for getting those resources across the organization. But you've said communication several times. I love that because I think everything we do ultimately is a people game. Like we're navigating people, we're navigating ideas, perspectives, there's funding to be gotten, there's decisions to be made, and all of that is in the landscape of people. So communication is huge. Yes, even in tool selections. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
How
Absolutely.
how well do you think organizations, from your experience, do that?
Generally, that's where I see the biggest gap. Um, because the salespeople for these tools, they come into executive leadership generally, whether it's IT management or someone in business development side. They say, hey, if you buy our tool, you'll be able to do this. And the entire time IT is going, we're already short 3 people, 5 people, 10 people. We can't keep up. All of our systems are breaking down. You're not giving us the funding that we need to sustain what we already have, and now we got to make this other tool work. And it just um, communication and funding. That's where I see the biggest issues and failures. Um, and oftentimes I've got a client right now that we're working on cleaning up their systems. They have one particular department that kind of just went rogue and signed up for all these different tools
Oh,
and
yay.
started using them to do whatever, what it is that they do. And meanwhile, the executives are going like, wait a minute, like how did this happen? Like how did we end up with this? You know, can't say too much, but
Oh, of
um,
course.
they ended up with a mess on their hands, and we're working to clean it up. But it's been going
Yeah.
on for over a year, and it's probably going to take another year or two to get it fully cleaned up. And it's just a mess, and that affects your
Yeah.
day to day.
It does. Very much so. Yeah, we're going to talk about the dreaded shadow or rogue IT later. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And continuing right in with the people issue, this right here, you're kind of touching on exactly this point that a lot of times these tools get purchased in silos and they don't get purchased kind of in a cohesive way. Sometimes security is the one doing that or tech, but then sometimes it's the business exactly and it's other teams. But the whole point is there should be this kind of buy-in across the organization. And I see a lot of companies, they don't take the time to really get that buy-in, which is playing the people game. And so then you end up with all these silos. We see companies routinely with two, three, four GRC tools, like the different tools, but that theoretically do the same thing. And it's because they didn't talk to each other, they don't want to use the same tool, they don't think they do the same thing, they just don't know what the other one does. I mean, it's crazy out there. Do you see similar with the cross-functional buy-in and how important that is?
Yeah, and I mean, and to go back to the example that I just brought up, this client, they purchased various tools just for one feature. And so you have
Uh, yep,
all of these, you know, kind of overlapping tools, but one has
yep,
this feature, one has the other feature, and this is just that the nature of out of box software is they kind of expect you to shoehorn your business model and your workflows into how they design their software.
yep,
And that's one option. The other option is you spend 6 7 figures in perpetuity to customize something or build
yep,
something from scratch, and a smaller business just doesn't have the money to do that. Not everyone is an IBM or an HP or Apple to where they just have unlimited money to develop their own software for their own workflows.
yep. So true. Yeah, and you're talking about the next one, the implementation. One, it's not, especially SaaS tools, I can be logged into it within minutes. Okay, great. So there we go. I'm done. I'm using it. And we see that a lot where you get one use case put onto the platform because they bought it for one feature or one use case. Oh my gosh. And then they don't know that it does all this other stuff because it was really never this strategy about, okay, we're bringing this thing into the organization. What are our use cases that we're going to implement? What's going to be the timeline of those? And then being very intentional about how we do this. But again, more often it's, hey, we have this one pain, this one problem, knee jerk, go get this thing. And then to your point, sometimes the other people, they don't even know the tool exists, or they don't even know the other features because it's really just been that single feature centric. So what would you say to a company, just high level, when they buy a new tool, to not get stuck kind of in this mindset?
I would ask for an extended demo,
Oh, that's good.
60 to 90 days evaluation,
Like a POC.
and really put it through its paces to make sure it's really what you want. Because once you put your data, again, all these systems are cloud connected, it's really easy for you to import your data, but it's really difficult to extricate it if
Yeah.
you realize that, hey, maybe this isn't what it was cracked up to be, or we missed some things along the way. So an extended due diligence period is critical, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point because if you do, even if you don't implement a tool, great, you still take the time to implement it. It gets embedded in your organization.
Yeah.
Switching is painful. It's hard. You got to get your data out, figure out where you're going to put it. I mean, you got to start it, and it's costly. And so, to your point, spend a little bit more time up front. I think it's so easy in the SaaS model, and then of course with salespeople pushing that oh, it's easy, it's here, you just start using it. It feels like the short path, but when you start to really kind of look at these other layers, like hold on, maybe it's okay to slow the cycle down. That's a
Yeah.
really good insight because let's really be intentional about how we do this.
Yeah, and something else that I've noticed in in my career is not everyone is necessarily asked of their opinion. The foot soldiers, so to speak.
Hmm?
Those are the people that are really going to tell you what the shortcomings and or the benefits of the tool are. It's you kind of have to listen to the people who are going to use it every day and not just make a decision based on you know
Yeah.
finances, the cost of the tool or the features that are promised. Let's actually put it to use for a time period, and get the feedback from the actual user base of the would-be tool and see what they have to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's the same problem in risk. To create a culture of risk across an organization, you involve everybody all the way down to the people, pushing the buttons, because those people a lot of times know things that executives and even middle management doesn't know. And then if you don't take the time to solicit their input, then you've missed a whole perspective. Yeah, so I love that you brought that up. That's a really great point. Another one is ownership and accountability. Sometimes this is a change. I mean, there, especially in the security space, there's a lot of turnover out there, a lot of turnover. So a lot of times tools will get bought by one particular person or group, and then fast forward a year later, they're no longer around. And so who knows who even owns this thing? And then sometimes the ownership was never really set to the beginning. What's the danger of not having good ownership of a platform?
If you don't have ownership of it, then you don't have anyone that really cares about it.
Yeah,
Um, you kind of have to let someone nurture the baby, so to speak.
that's good.
Uh, but the other side of that coin is you also don't want to give too much control of the baby to just one person. You
Yeah.
kind of need both parents in the mix. So
Yep.
I like to have redundancy. For me, I've got a strong infrastructure background, and I don't like single points of failure. So I like to have someone that has ownership of a system, but I also want redundancy. I also want someone, a secondary and a tertiary person who has at least the basic knowledge and understanding of how it works, what it does. They don't necessarily need to know it day to day, but enough that if you know the primary owner gets hit by a bus, gets fired, leaves,
Wins the lottery.
um, right, wins the lottery, they the business can continue to operate, and we don't have orphaned systems out there.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been dancing around it, but I'm just going to say it because it makes me laugh. But security and tech people hate documentation with a passion.
Yep.
Yes, hate, hate, hate. So they just won't do it. So this is why we don't see IT strategy documents. This is why we're constantly fighting on policies and procedures. And the reality is that's an important, there's so much tribal knowledge in companies. And the reality is turnover is high. So it is important that that ownership is assigned. And then if that person wins the lottery, and let's assume they will, then, what are we going to do then? And then the other thing you said, which I love, is you got to nurture the baby. And so many of these tools, it's like, oh, I buy the tool. It's like I go to Home Depot, I buy the hammer. It sits in my garage. I don't need to worry about it. It's there. It's waiting for me. Okay, but that's not the way this landscape works. This is
Yep.
not a hammer sitting in the garage waiting for me. This is integrated into our business. And so, to your point, we do have to nurture these. None of these implementations are set it and forget it. And that's where companies go wrong. Like, oh,
Yep.
this was great 2 years ago, but we haven't looked at it since then. Okay, but your business has changed. The world has changed. That tool has changed. Your infrastructure has changed. So it's a
Yep.
constant process of reevaluating these tools in the context of your environment.
Yep.
And then this is kind of what we're talking about here, lack of ongoing management and tuning. This is nurturing the baby for sure. These, you know, if there's not like, it makes me laugh because there's certain practices, like in cybersecurity, for example, that you would subscribe to the vendor to get their support notices. Sometimes, like if we propose that or we ask companies about that, they laugh like, are you kidding me? Okay, but that's a very real mechanism. Like, how do you know there's new features? How do you know there's security holes? How do you know these things are coming down the pipe so that your owner or your governing body of this thing can then evaluate that and decide what needs to happen? How have you seen companies or your recommended way of really nailing this ongoing management, monitoring and tuning of tools?
um Honestly, this is probably my biggest challenge.
Oh, love it.
It's probably my biggest challenge because for the business minded person who has no background in IT or systems or you know nurturing a baby, so to speak, proverbially, um, it's they generally see IT as a cost center,
Yeah.
and they just see this really big black hole of an expense that they don't understand what it's doing or not doing. They don't know why they keep asking for more money, and so
Yeah.
stuff gets delayed. That's one side of it. The other side of it is a legacy application team who hasn't updated their app in 15 or 20 years. The guy that wrote it retired long ago. They have enough documentation to keep it running, but it's not, you can't really make it more current without completely redoing it.
Yeah.
See black hole of expense. So it just becomes this albatross around IT's neck, trying to, they're basically stuck between a rock and a hard place of having to update certain systems, but keeping legacy systems around, because we're married to this 20-year-old, access database based system. And it's just a really tough place to be. And ultimately, a lot of people end up leaving out of frustration. So it just perpetuates the cycle. So somehow we have to get over this hump of, hey, like, we know it's been done this way in the past. You got to recognize that it was not necessarily the correct thing to keep this thing around. We got to figure out a way to get it current. And we might have to hire a dev shop. It's going to be expensive. So what's the cost of a cybersecurity breach?
I was
A
just gonna
lot of
say.
these breaches, I believe it was a Colonial Pipeline hack. I'm having a tough time remembering the exact details, but I believe they're the ones that fired their CIO not long before the hack, and it turns out that they were hacked, they were breached because their systems weren't being patched.
Ugh, patching.
So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but those are the details that I seem to remember.
I'm just chuckling because patching in general is challenging for companies.
Yeah, and there's plenty of tools for it. Microsoft has WSUS. It's built in. You can set systems to automatically update within Windows without WSUS. So there's a lot of tools for it, but they're not being used because of one reason or another. Whether it's not allowed because of a legacy application, or no one has time to set it up. They don't want to spend the money on additional infrastructure components to get it stood up. Take your pick, but these are all part of nurturing the baby, and sooner or later it's going to come back to bite.
Yeah, there are a lot of tools that do that if we just kind of camp on that one, patching, and some of them work quite well. However, there are certain appliances or, like you said, legacy infrastructure where it doesn't work well.
Right.
And so there's your holes. And so I kind of think about it like if I'm in my house and I've bought all these tools to take care of the doors and the windows and the this and the that, but oh, there's this one door that comes from the attic and there's no tool for that. Well, guess what? That's where the perpetrator will come. So it almost doesn't matter all the rest. It does matter, but it's all the rest. But then unfortunately, you already alluded to it. Then you take executives who don't understand, business leaders, and then you take security and tech people who maybe haven't done the best job of helping them to understand. And so then they don't know that, but here's my one hole, and this is where my risk is. And so what are we going to do about this to either, you know, hire a security guard to stand watch over that door because I can't patch it and take care of it? What are the compensating measures are we going to put into place to deal with this while we come up with a bigger strategy? But that's the dialogues, that's the thought process that are within organizations. I feel like sometimes people hear, oh, well, we have the patching tools. Yeah, you do. But do you monitor your patching? Do you know what's out of date? Do you even know what you have? Do you know where your holes are? And boy, that's where companies really fail. It's easy to buy the tool. It's hard to operate it in that particular case.
Yeah. When was the last time the tool was audited?
Ooh, never is a lot of what? Wait, what? What did you just say? Crazy talk, crazy talk. Yeah, that's exactly right. Very good point. And it's yeah, it's really unfortunate. And then, we do a lot of compliance, which is ultimately intended to be risk mitigation, which is what you do as well, and helping to keep businesses healthy. And so much of this stuff is in there. But then unfortunately, human nature, people just want to take the quick, easy path and they miss the real problems with this stuff to really dig in. And just exactly what you said, when was the last time the tool was audited? We had one client like a year ago or something that, of course, all the endpoints were managed, right? Of course they were. Absolutely. 100%. Then, we asked for some validation and dug into that. It was like a third. Oops, we just didn't register them. Oh, who knew that happened? Because you didn't take the time to look, because you didn't have practices that trusted but verified what needed to be done.
Yeah, and this is where I'll tie it back to a previous point I made about IT and business leaders being in tight knit communication, regular communication. If the business leaders
Yep.
tell IT, "Hey, this is where we're going," IT should have the space to come back and say, "Okay, in order for us to get there, here's a list of 15 things
Yeah.
in order of priority that we have to get done. We have to get caught up on to get to that point."
Yep. And if we don't, here's the ramifications of not doing that.
Yep.
So you know what? I've done my job. I've told you what we need to do because to be clear, the risk of the organization sits with the leadership. It sits with everyone, but it sits with the leadership. But our job is to help them to understand it for sure. So yes, and what you're talking about again is aligning to those business objectives and that strategy. And then there was some other nuance you kind of mentioned of mutual respect, and I feel like that has to exist within organizations. IT security people have to respect the business leadership, but the business leadership has to respect the IT security people. Sometimes those people are wild cowboys and just want to go off and buy a bunch of cool stuff. But a
Yep.
lot of times there's reasons why they're proposing what they're proposing. I had a conversation not too long ago where basically the leadership of the company questioned the CISO. Like I went on the website and saw that this tool and this tool are really the same thing. So why did you purchase both of them? I, I mean, that's just a fundamental breakdown of respect because that tech leader, that security leader definitely had reasons. I mean, obviously there's best of breed with different tools. And so, it makes sense in some cases. Some cases it doesn't, but definitely that mutual respect back and forth. If we kind of go back a little bit to the SaaS, which is a lot of everything, is it was interesting. I read an article, I don't know, I think the team was talking about an article not that long ago, where basically, and you mentioned CrowdStrike already, like that took out hospitals, not directly, but because it's embedded, 10 layers down, ultimately, and it took out airlines. I mean, we all saw the effect. Who would have ever thought that? I mean, I guess if you really kind of maybe step back and thought it through, you might have could have anticipated that, but nobody anticipated, or not many people anticipated that. But we're also like intertwined now, like random company over here does whatever and it's embedded in different things, and then it's this ripple effect just through our world. And so I've been saying for years, like cybersecurity is a social ill for all of us. It's our data, it's our livelihoods, it's everything. Like we are all vested into this thing. And then you mentioned something earlier that made me think of this whole shared responsibility. People buy tools, they buy SaaS products, and then, oh, okay, everything's taken care of. It's not. And I think you mentioned that, shared responsibility is sometimes some of the most difficult stuff to kind of sort out. What are your thoughts when I mention shared responsibility?
Um, that one's really tough. Basically, it's going to come down to what the terms of service
Yeah.
says and how good the legal teams are. Who can afford the better lawyer?
Oh,
That that's not. I don't think that that's a technical problem to solve. Honestly, um, if there's the only way that's really I see that as a technical resolution or a technical way to resolve it is if we eliminate it. We find a way to bring something in house and find an on-prem tool that can handle whatever the requirement is, but being in the shared space is very difficult because at that point it's going to be the lawyers duking it out, and you might get a settlement out of it, you might get XYZ, but there's not going to be the damage is going to be done. Look at
yeah.
all of the data leaks that happen. what's the point of signing up for the class action lawsuit? Like the data's already out there. It's not coming back.
That's right. It's done.
So it's a it's a slippery slope. I don't think there's a good answer or solution for it other than, hey, let's reevaluate private versus public cloud and really analyze how much risk we're willing to take on here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't see it coming back. You bring up a very valid point, but I don't see it coming back. What I more often see is people putting their head in the sand
Mm-hmm.
for the risk, and either they're putting their head in the sand on purpose, they know it, or they really just don't understand it. But yeah, that is really interesting. I had a dialogue with a client not too long ago, and it was exactly what you said. Like the third party, which which was a is a bit of a niche third party, which there's a lot of them out there, right? And so it's not as easy to just switch to the next one because it's a niche third party provider. But they were definitely not doing security to the level that, this company would expect. But what do you do? Like, you're right, you call the lawyer or you stop using the tool. Like, those are your choices. Or you mitigate your risk a different way. But if they entirely have the data, then how are you going to do that? There's not necessarily a lot of ways to do that. So you bring up a very interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, so on that front, if I were the business leader and if I were the CTO of a company in that boat, the question I would be asking is, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst thing that could happen? You know?
Yeah.
And then let's overlay that with potentially hiring another person or two and training them to do something that, can be done by a human. And let's not depend on a tool. Let's find a human that can do it, that someone that we can trust, someone that we can pour into, we can develop and say, hey, like automation doesn't solve everything.
It does not.
It looks great on paper. It looks great on a spreadsheet. It looks great on a quarterly earnings report, but that's generally very short-sighted.
Yeah.
We've got to start looking at the long-term cost to benefit a little more closely,
Yeah.
because we're really starting to see uh, fallout from outsourcing everything and putting everything in the cloud, and it's starting to the chickens are going to come home to roost sooner than later.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That was that article. I want to say it was somebody from JP Morgan Chase put that out. It wasn't like call to action or, like a warning, but it kind of was to think about exactly what you just said. Like everything is so outsourced and so intertwined. Fast forward, what is that really going to do? Now, I think the day of companies going back to on-prem and owning everything, that's not going to happen either. So it really is striking the balance. It's interesting because you're right. What the third party is doing, you either have to accept that or you don't. Like that's your choices. However, there is a lot of things internally that you can do to help with the positioning. For example, this is an obvious easy one, but access control, like AWS is going to provide the mechanism for you to build access control and permissions. But that's on you how you do it. They have the mechanism, but how you do it is on you. And then I find that companies don't take this shared responsibility real seriously to really understand, you mentioned terms of service right at the start of this little dialogue but they don't really take the time to understand, hey, where do they stop and where do I start? And what's important. For example, not many people know that in a SOC 2 report, there's a section called the kooks, which is basically what the user entity is responsible for. So the company receiving the audit and going through the attestation of the SOC 2 defines That's fine. Everything in this report is valid, but this section right here, that's on you. And these things only matter if you do your part. But can I tell you how many companies like know that it exists, first of all, know what it means, and goes through and actually looks at it and go, do we actually do these things such that everything we just read in this report will be valid? And I don't see that a lot. And so it's interesting too, because we do a lot of CMMC work, and CMMC is very prescriptive in how this whole shared responsibility is coming down. Most of the other handling of third parties has become, unfortunately, more kind of check the box. And so I'm pleased to see CMMC trying to like formalize. Do you know what you do? Do you know what they do? Do you understand how they do it and how those two halves meet and come together?
Yeah, and there has to be a point of accountability. There has to be a way that people can be held accountable for not acting on risks and vulnerabilities and information that has now been brought to their attention. It's
Yeah.
one thing to not know. That's why we audit and review systems. Once we are aware of those shortcomings, we have to act on it. And the unregulated, the commercial sector doesn't really act on things until there's a breach, until there's some sort of pain, until
Uh,
there's an outage.
so true.
Then you become the most important person in the room.
Yep.
Yeah, I worked at a business and worked on a system that was very hot button. Everyone passed it around like a hot potato. No one wanted to touch it because no one understood it until there was an outage. And then I had a VP and a senior director in my cubicle standing over my shoulder. When are you going to have it back up? When are you going to have it back up? Can you have it back up within the hours? Like, I don't know. I don't even know
Yeah.
what's wrong yet. You haven't
But
added anything to its budget in
I
years.
was going to say, yeah, that dialogue probably started years prior, honestly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, so there is a right way to do this. We've talked a lot about, things that go wrong and don't go right, but let's talk about the right way to do this. So start with a purpose. Again, aligns back to the business objectives or the risk that you're trying to mitigate. Define success early. You alluded to it earlier that, slow down your buying decision on purpose. I thought that was amazing. Like, that's a huge takeaway from this. Slow it down. Salespeople are like, do it now, do it now, do it now. I hear this all the time. Time kills deals, time kills deals. They're constantly pressuring you, buy now, buy now, buy now. The reality is maybe you need to slow it down so that one, you can truly understand the purpose. What is going to be successful about this thing? And then really have the time to engage the right people. There's some more on the next slide, but what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my approach with my clients is I come in and for the first, my typical engagement's about 18 months. For the first few months, we're not making a whole lot of changes. I'm getting to know how the business operates.
It's great.
The
Yeah.
people that I work with already have day jobs. They don't need me coming in and turning everything inside out.
Yeah.
So I come in and I help them make small tweaks that have an impact in their day to day, but add up to a lot over time. And then as I get to know who I'm working with, what my skill sets are, what leadership is really like, then I can start coming up with a plan and say, hey, like I really think we need to put this towards the top of the list. This other thing, let's put it out 6 months and do things in a small incremental way so that we're still allowing people to do their jobs and we're not overwhelming them with changes that to the point that they just become ineffective.
Yeah.
So this all comes down to human psychology. Humans don't like change,
No, they do not. None of
right?
us. Yep.
And the only time people are gonna adopt change is when they're forced to. So at some point we have to get off the fence, but it's also a lot like eating an elephant. You got to do it one bite at a time. If you don't have the culture of keeping up with your systems, that's not going to be a light switch moment. That's going to come over time. So things aren't going to look a whole lot different day to day, but we'll look back 3, 6, 12 months from now, and we're going to see that we're a lot further ahead than we were. So that's my approach to changes, new tools, what have you. I just don't see any benefit to turning everything inside out. Sometimes you got to rip the band-aid off and make a big change, but not before we spend weeks or months talking about it, preparing for it, figuring out what could go wrong, and then realizing that, hey, we know 90% of what we need to know. This 10% we're not sure about, send it.
Yeah, that's great. We're playing the long game for sure. And so when you make short-term knee-jerk decisions, there's a long-term implication of that. Just like you said, you overwhelm people, you lose your efficiency, you tie up funding that should be allocated to something else because it's a better decision or better priority over here. And then I love what you said. It's the people game. Like people change management is the hardest aspect of what we do. I can buy a tool every hour, no problem, but I can't get one person to change in weeks. That is again, that's playing the long game. So I love that you're bringing that out. Okay, if we continue this, so we want to evaluate it for the right fit, not just features. We talked about that a little earlier. When you get stuck on like the features of the tool and not the outcome, we see this when companies are trying to evaluate GRC tools. Oh, but this one has this feature, this feature, this feature. Doesn't matter. What are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal as an organization? What is your outcomes for all of this? If you clearly understand that, then you will find the tool that is the best fit because I'm sure you will agree when I say this, there is no perfect tool. Zero, nada, doesn't exist. No perfect tool. The minute you think that or believe the lie of that, forget it. Every tool has its pluses and minuses. So if you have a clear understanding of your outcomes, now you're just not comparing feature to feature to feature, which quite frankly is a lot of noise, makes it very difficult, makes it very prone to picking the wrong platform, making the wrong choice. And then once that decision is made based on the outcomes, build a plan, put the plan into place, engage the people elements that you just mentioned, implement that thing with the strategy, not just a knee-jerk single use case. That strategy is liable to go on for years, honestly, and then measure that thing and constantly tweak and tune it. What would you add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. It's that planning part, and technology is a tool. You're going to get out of it what you put into it, and expecting the tool to do your job is where a lot of people go wrong. You just, you know, like you said earlier about the hammer. You can go buy a hammer, but it's going to sit on a shelf unless you actually do something with it. You got to know how to use it, and it might take you a handful of swings to figure out the perfect swing and how to hit the nail every time. Even then, you might miss.
Yep.
Um, I've got this. It's not my original theory, so I can't take credit for it. I can't remember where I heard it, but essentially, a lot of people just live life reacting to life as it happens to them. They don't really have a plan. They just kind of go about
Yep.
doing things and as it gets in front of them, and that's a rough way to live. You end up
Yes.
being a very reactive, very reactionary to whatever happens to be going on. So
Yep.
somehow you gotta turn the horse and the cart around and start going in a different direction. Otherwise, it's just going to be sink or swim all the time, and you can't sustain that. You gotta have a plan.
Yeah, no, that's great. It reminds me when we were raising a child and I would tell her that I don't care what you do in life, just be intentional about it. Be a
Mhm.
basket weaver. It doesn't matter what you want to go
Right,
do in life. Just do something on purpose. Don't just trip and
right.
fall into it, which this is that same exact dialogue. So very,
Yep.
very good point. On this note, short plug, June 3rd, we are doing one of these live sessions, specifically GRC tool focused. I think there's over 400 in the marketplace, so that is a lot of noise right there. So to recap, the life cycle of a tool is definitely align it to your outcomes, configure it, patch it, monitor it. We talked about this, and then continually reevaluate it. Is this still the right tool? Is there somebody owning it? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to improve it? And when it's time to retire it, decommission. What would you add to that?
Nothing. I think it's great.
Okay.
A
And
solid plan.
then, yeah, thank you. The last one makes me chuckle because decommission companies historically are not good at that. They just stop doing it. Or my personal favorite, When you go into organizations brand new, how much shelfware do you typically find?
Fair
We
bit.
laugh. It's not funny, but it is. We find tools that literally are on the shelf. And we do a lot of work with obviously the GRC SaaS tools. And so I'm constantly telling them if it's shelfware, they're not going to renew. Like, give me a break. Like, your job is to help get them embedded in this thing and to really see the value. And a lot of times they need additional help to make that happen. And so it's the same across the board. They buy random cyber tools, random tech tools, and then yeah, you seriously, you mentioned like your engagement is typically 18 months. I'm assuming this is one of the first things you do is to come in and look at the tool landscape.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to come in and figure out, okay, what are you using today? What's working? What's not working?
Yep.
Uh, what are your major pain points? And let's see what we can do with it.
Yep. And then roll it out if we're not using it, or figure out somebody bought it for a reason. Let's figure out what it is.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's not totally shelfware, but it's only being used. You mentioned it earlier, like for one little tiny baby use case. Like,
Yeah.
do we really need that? Is that really the right thing to do here? Or is there a way to expand that? Or better yet, one tool for one use case, another tool for a second use case, come to find out they actually do the same thing, and we could eliminate a whole tool. Like, it's really just looking at that landscape. That's the strategy. And then I have to bring up software inventories, because just like cyber strategies and IT strategies that I rarely see in companies formalize, software inventories, what I most often see is discovery sources. What can I tell you? Discovery sources is not an inventory listing. That's different. So what do you see? Do you see companies have good software inventories all the way down to the component level and ownership and all the details necessary?
I didn't realize you were doing a stand-up routine.
That's awesome. I try.
No, generally they don't. I've got one client that does it phenomenally well.
Oh,
Uh,
impressive.
it's a very manual routine. They just have a spreadsheet, but that spreadsheet has everything in it. Um,
Works.
I don't have any other clients that are anywhere close to that.
Yeah, most of them, they have, various different discovery sources. And then if they're an environment with any complexity at all, the spreadsheet, they've kind of outgrown the ability to be able to do it that way. Although, Zoltan, I would take that over, nothing, right? Of
Yep.
course.
Yep.
But yeah, it's an intentional activity. It's a very challenging activity. And then, we tend to document what we know, but then we have this conversation when it comes to, which software is part of assets, but it's, the bigger asset inventory, and you can't protect what you don't know, so you have to have it. We'll do BIA exercises for companies, and we discover tools that the organization didn't even know they were using, so that, kind of goes back to the shadow IT thing. And so this is really important because, I remember back when log4j became a big deal. Like, companies didn't even know if they had it. They're like, I don't think we have that. Are you sure? Are you sure? Because it's embedded in a lot of stuff. Like, are you sure? And then, oh crap, we do have it. Yeah, but they didn't have good practice here, and so they weren't able to know that.
My favorite is when it's tied to an employee's personal email address.
Uh, yeah, still find that. Yeah, we did some work with a large SaaS client, and it was crazy in their AWS account how many personal emails were part of the access control. Like, first of all, how did they get in there? That's failure number one. Failure number two, why did we not see these? Right. So those are whole different problems. It's a mess out there. That's the bottom line.
Yep.
So so good inventory should definitely include ownership, status, patching, support metrics, if it's licensing, like all of those. And then when it comes to assets, not all assets are deployed. And so you still have to know what assets are sitting on a shelf, which ones are waiting for end of life, or maybe already at end of life. Like, there's more to it than just discovery sources. Let's talk about for a moment the shadow IT. I bet you find this a lot by nature of what you do. So shadow or rogue IT, shadow, of course, the much nicer term, is basically business units most likely going off and just buying what they need to do. My personal favorite are the free ones, because the free ones can fly right under the radar. They don't have to go through procurement. They don't have to go through the due diligence processes. They can just start using them tomorrow. Do you see that, I'm sure?
Oh yeah, all the time. And then, the big check and balance on this is people having full admin rights to their machines. They can just install whatever.
Yeah. Which is still a thing. We still
Yep.
come across it. You would think in 2025 that wouldn't be an issue anymore, but it is. And then there's definitely business justification for having it in some cases, but then that's where monitoring takes over. But monitoring, we all have heard about the event or the log fatigue, and so then if you don't monitor those well, or it becomes a lot of noise, so you don't know which end is up, then that makes that really challenging as well. Here's the
Yep.
bottom line: third-party software is introducing risk into your organization. Hard stop. Like,
Yep.
it's introducing security risk, data risk, operational risk. Like, look at the CrowdStrike. Like, third-party software is third-party risk. I don't think we're going back to a fully on-prem world ever, but we have to get really good at mitigating the risk of bringing these third parties into our organization. What aggravates me, and aggravates me continually, is this whole check the box mentality. Oh, I have to do third party risk management. I have to do due diligence. I have to do questionnaires. Oh, check, 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 check. Look at that. They're great. No, this is a risk exercise. You said it earlier. I really have to think about what could go wrong and how embedded is this thing in the organization. I tell clients all the time, if that third party thing goes belly up, it's your name in the news.
Mhm.
Your name. Sure, they'll be in the news for their own problems, but your clients will look to you. And
Right.
so it's on you. You don't get to just point to them. It's not the way this thing works.
Yep.
And then on the right there, the performance monitoring, because unfortunately compliance is driving a lot of behavior. Positives to that, but great negatives to how human nature kicks in with that. So initial due diligence and ongoing due diligence from a security standpoint is typically required. But then how often do you see companies really monitoring their vendors ongoing for their performance, for their SLAs, looking at what's happening in the world? There's some new tools coming up where you can start to see like real-time vulnerabilities against your third parties. That's great information, but you said something earlier. Can I tell you, if you don't action against that information, then don't have the information. Like, then
Right.
then don't do it.
Right.
And then AI, of course, is going to solve the world. I'm going to go on my comedy routine again. It's going to take over the world. We've all seen the Terminator movie. It's going to happen. It makes me laugh. I tell it it's dumb on a regular basis because it's certainly not quite there. But there are definitely value, like, log fatigue, for example, or a lot of events. I mean, there's value that it can certainly help with an organization. And I think fast forward a year, it's going to be crazy what's happened in the world when it comes to AI. But the reality is it's still a risk introduction into the organization. And we must never forget that. And then I don't know about you, but I think AI is the worst shadow or rogue IT that's happening right now. Like, we know people
Yep.
are using it and doing it. And how are we monitoring for that within our organizations?
I don't think we are. I think I mean, people are loading whatever on their phone that also has company data on it. A lot of times
Yeah.
confidential data. Same with the computers. Going to um, the various models and putting in information to get something back out. And it's if I were CISO at a large company, it would be blocked altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a challenge because you for sure want to leverage efficiency and those gains. But I think the key takeaway, at least from my perspective, is technology is awesome. I love technology. There's a lot of gains to be had. We're not going to go back to when people sit in four walls and not allowed to bring in their phones or talk to anybody. But the reality is, it is introducing risks into the organization, and we have to be very, very intentional about how we do that. What would you leave the audience with?
Uh, Come up with a plan. It's okay if you don't have one
Thank
today.
you.
Come up with some sort of an actionable plan that can help move you forward. No matter how small the steps are, take a look at where you are today. Figure out where you want to be. next week, next month, by the end of the year, and then work backwards, create some sort of a 5-step plan, 3-step plan, 7-step plan that you can effectively execute on to help you achieve that goal.
Yeah, that's
Start
great.
looking forward.
I love it. That is really great. So we have upcoming webinars. Definitely check them out. Also, if you want us to help you with the GRC health check, we can help you with that. Zoltan, I really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Really appreciate that you hung out today with us, and I really appreciate your insights and taking your time to share with us. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Take care.